It always starts the same. Someone new. They seem kind, safe, different. But then, slowly, silently, the cracks begin to show. A comment, a look, a shift in how they speak to you. Small things that feel too familiar. And before you know it, you're in the same story with a different name. Same ache, same confusion, same ache in your chest that says, I've been here before. You tell yourself you're overreacting, that you're too sensitive, that maybe it's your fault for trusting too fast, for hoping again. You wonder if you attract pain, if something about you invites it. You look back at every old message, every warning sign, and ask yourself, why didn't I see it? But what if the answer isn't about what you missed, but what you've been carrying? What if you're not attracting pain because you enjoy it, but because a hidden part of you mistakes pain for love? Carl Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So maybe this isn't bad luck. Maybe it's not because you're broken. Maybe it's a pattern, trying to be seen. A lesson dressed as a wound. A message repeating itself. Not to break you, but to wake you. Because you don't attract what you want. You attract what feels familiar. What feels safe, even when it hurts. And until you understand the origin, you'll keep reliving the same story. With a different face. But this time, you're not here to blame yourself. You're here to break the cycle. To bring the unseen into the light. To listen to the pattern. And choose something new. You tell yourself, I'll never go through that again. You swear it won't happen next time. You read the books. You go to therapy. You raise your standards. You look for red flags. You try to heal. And yet, somehow, without even realizing it, you find yourself back in the same story. Same confusion. Same gut instinct. Same ache in your chest. That whispers, you've been here before. Why does it keep happening? Because the mind can evolve, but the nervous system, it remembers. Carl Jung believed we don't just inherit genetics. We inherit emotional blueprints. These blueprints are written early, sometimes before we even have words. In households where love was inconsistent, where comfort came with conditions, where silence felt safer than speaking, you learn to watch, to adapt, to please, to read the room, before you ever learn to read books. And most of all, you learn that love doesn't always feel safe. That sometimes, love means waiting. Love means shrinking. Love means surviving. So now, as an adult, when someone offers you safety, real, steady, kind love, it feels foreign. It feels fake. It feels undeserved. But when someone pulls away, leaves your messages unread, sends mixed signals, gives just enough to keep you hoping, a part of you says, yes, this feels like home, because it matches the tension you grew up in. It mirrors the chase, the hunger, the hope, and survival feels familiar, and familiar feels like love. So you don't choose people who hurt you because you're weak. You choose them because your nervous system recognizes their energy and calls it safe. You're not broken. You're patterned. You're conditioned. And that conditioning lives in your body. This is what Jung meant when he said we're driven by the unconscious, not by logic, not by choice, but by wounds we've never fully seen. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So what you call bad luck in love might actually be a trauma loop, a silent script inside you, replaying again and again, until you interrupt it, until you ask, who taught me what love feels like? What does my body think is normal? Because once you see the pattern, you can choose differently. Not immediately, not perfectly, but with awareness. And awareness changes everything. This isn't about blame. It's about freedom. Because you were never weak. You were surviving. But now, you're ready to heal and choose again. Most people think they know what love feels like. Warmth, joy, safety. But for some of us, love never felt like that. It felt like walking on eggshells, like holding your breath, like waiting for affection that never came, like earning love by being quiet, helpful, perfect, so no one would leave. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But what if you never had the chance to be fully accepted in the first place? What if your earliest experiences of love came wrapped in guilt, in performance, in pain? What if I love you was followed by silence? What if affection came only after you met expectations, only when you didn't need too much? Then your unconscious doesn't learn. Love is peace. It learns. Love is work. Love is stress. Love is losing yourself to keep connection. And even when it hurt, you stayed. Because deep down, you learned to equate love with survival. So now, as an adult, you don't chase love. You chase approval, validation, moments that mimic your childhood longings. You think, if I can finally make this person love me, then I'll prove I'm enough. Then I'll finally feel safe. But you were worthy. Before anyone failed to see you, you were lovable, even when they couldn't love you well. You just learned love, in a language made of fear, and sacrifice, and absence. And the brain, it remembers emotional patterns, more than logic. It chases what's familiar, not what's healthy. So when someone comes along and loves you without asking you to shrink, to chase, to explain, your nervous system resists, because it feels too calm to be true. You call it boring, or unexciting. But what it really is love that doesn't hurt. And your system is still learning how to trust that. Because what you called love was often just trauma, wearing a familiar face. But here's the truth. You don't need to earn love. You just need to unlearn the version that taught you to bleed to feel worthy. You think you're making adult decisions. You tell yourself you've grown. You analyze. You weigh the pros and cons. You convince yourself it's logic, that you're choosing consciously. But sometimes, it's not your adult self making the choice. It's your wounded inner child, quietly steering the wheel, in search of someone familiar. Not someone who will love you. Not someone who will heal you. But someone who will feel like home, even if that home was filled with silence, distance, control, expectations you could never meet. Love you had to earn, because to that child, love didn't mean safety. Love meant survival. And survival felt like walking on eggshells. Carl Jung believed that the child you once were lives on in the adult you become. That until we make peace with them, they keep writing our story. From behind the scenes, from old wounds, from unmet needs. That child isn't looking for romance. They're looking for repair. They want someone to stay when no one else did. Someone to notice when no one ever looked. So when you meet someone cold, unavailable, inconsistent, your adult self hesitates, but your inner child leans in. Because that dynamic feels familiar, and familiar feels safe. They think, if I can just make this person love me, maybe I'll finally be enough. Maybe I'll finally be okay. But here's the truth. You can't rewrite your childhood through someone else's love. You can't heal old wounds by reopening them in new bodies. No partner can be your parent. No relationship can undo the past. Because healing doesn't come from changing others. It comes from finally seeing yourself. That child inside you doesn't need to earn love. They need to be held. They need to be heard. They need to be chosen by you. Because every time your inner child chooses for you, they're not looking for love. They're looking for a parent. And no lover, no matter how kind, should have to carry that weight. You find someone who's hurting. They're distant, unavailable, emotionally lost. And you feel drawn to them, not in spite of their pain, but because of it. You think, if I can love them enough, they'll finally feel safe. They'll open up. They'll finally choose me. But here's what Carl Jung would say. We don't fall in love with people by accident. We fall in love with the version of ourselves we most want to heal. So when you try to fix someone, You're not just trying to save them. You're trying to save a part of you. The part that was unchosen, unseen, unheard. You pour your love into someone who can't receive it, because a long time ago, you couldn't receive it either. And now, deep down, you believe, if I can heal them, maybe I'll heal too. But here's the truth. Love is not a hospital. It's not a rehab center. It's not your job to fix someone else's chaos, just to prove you're worthy. That's not love. That's codependency. That's your trauma, trying to resolve itself through sacrifice. You become the caretaker, the emotional nurse, the anchor. You carry the weight because you think that if you hold enough pain, someone will finally stay. But pain doesn't make people stay. And healing someone else won't heal your emptiness, because what you're really doing is trying to rewrite your past. You think, if I can rescue them, I'll prove that I was never the problem. I'll finally be worthy. But worthiness was never the issue. You were always enough. They just couldn't see it. And now, neither can you. Carl Jung said that projection is when we see our unresolved pain in someone else's story. And when you try to save them, you're not just seeing their wounds, you're seeing your own. But no one can complete that story for you. No one can give you back the love you never received. Only you can. And if your love has to suffer to be seen, that's not love. That's a wound, wearing purpose as a disguise. You're not here to sacrifice your soul, to earn someone's attention. You're not here to prove you're enough by fixing people who don't want to grow. You're here to learn that you don't have to bleed to be loved. And the only person you were ever meant to save is yourself. You think you're choosing these people, that you're making conscious decisions, that your heart has a type, that your love has logic. But here's the truth. You're not choosing. You're responding to a frequency, to a feeling, to something that feels familiar. Not because it's good, not because it's love, but because it matches a memory you never fully left. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, it grows." So what you haven't healed, you're still vibrating with. And your body remembers, even when your mind forgets. So when you meet someone who feels emotionally unavailable, distant, inconsistent, your nervous system lights up. It doesn't say, "This is unsafe." It says, "This feels like home." Because that emotional frequency, that unpredictability, that longing, that ache, mirrors the chaos you survived. That's why stability feels boring, why peace feels suspicious, why kindness feels undeserved. Because you've been entrained, to associate intensity with love, drama with desire, silence with punishment, and confusion with connection. It's not your fault. It's your blueprint, the one that was laid down when you were still learning what love feels like. And if your blueprint said, love means working harder, love means chasing, love means waiting for someone to come around, then anything healthy won't feel like love. It'll feel too easy, too calm, too unfamiliar to trust. But that's not love. That's trauma bonding. That's emotional addiction. That's the pull of the familiar. You're not broken. You're just tuned in to a signal that's been playing since you were a child. But here's the good news. If you can be conditioned into chaos, you can be rewired into calm. It starts with noticing the pull, with asking yourself, do I feel seen or just activated? Do I feel safe or just stimulated? Because love isn't adrenaline. It's presence. It's ease. It's safe. And healing doesn't always feel good at first. It feels unfamiliar. But unfamiliar isn't bad. It's just new. And maybe now, you're ready for something new. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So when you keep choosing the same kind of person, cold, critical, distant, you might call it bad luck, coincidence, a flaw in judgment. But it's not random. It's a pattern, and it's trying to be seen. Because your unconscious doesn't forget. It remembers the wound, the abandonment, the neglect, the moment you first believed, I'm too much, I'm not enough, I'm unlovable, unless I earn it. And even now, a part of you is still hoping to rewrite that moment with someone new, someone who feels like the person who once hurt you. So you project. You give them the role your past left unfulfilled. You cast them as the parent who didn't choose you, the voice that never said, "You matter," the presence that never stayed. You don't want a partner. You want a redo. And when they fail you, when they pull away, when they treat you like you feared, the story feels confirmed. This is who I am. This is what I attract. This always happens. And so, the story repeats. Jung called this repetition compulsion. It's when we unconsciously recreate familiar pain, in hopes of mastering it. Not because we enjoy it, not because we're broken, but because we're still trying to get the ending we never got. But here's the truth. You can't finish a story by casting new characters in old roles. No one else can fix your past. No one else can make it right. Because that story wasn't yours to carry forever. You've been trying to end a sentence someone else left unfinished. You've been speaking a language you never wrote, but you don't have to keep rewriting it. With people who don't know your heart, you don't need their apology. You need your own seeing. And that begins when you stop asking others to love you like your past never did, and start loving yourself like you always needed. Close the book, not in anger, but in peace. Because what you've been seeking isn't them, it's you. For some of us, love has never been gentle. It wasn't hugs and safety. It was moods that shifted without warning, words that cut when they should have comforted. It was loud, chaotic, unpredictable. We didn't grow up feeling safe in love. We grew up surviving it. So now, when someone is calm, clear, and kind, it doesn't feel comforting. It feels suspicious. Because your nervous system was trained to equate love with tension, with fixing, with proving, with staying alert. Carl Jung said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And many of us grew up carrying pain that was never ours, becoming caretakers before we could even speak, trying to soothe storms we didn't create, trying to earn affection by shrinking ourselves small enough to stay loved. So now, love equals pressure, vigilance, walking on eggshells, because anything else feels too easy. You think, this can't be real. They're too calm. They must be hiding something. Because your body still believes that love is dangerous. But what if they're not hiding anything? What if peace isn't the threat, but the gateway to something new? You're not sabotaging love. You're protecting the part of you that had to grow up too fast, that learned, love hurts, so I must stay ready. But what if readiness isn't strength, but a trauma response? What if the healthiest thing you can do now is to let your body feel safe without needing to be on guard? Because there is a kind of love that doesn't ask you to chase it, that doesn't punish you for resting, that doesn't feel like a test you must pass every single day. A love that doesn't need you to be smaller, quieter, less emotional, just to stay. It's not dramatic. It's not intense. It's not filled with adrenaline and fear. It's soft, steady, safe. But you can only feel it if you stop running from calm and start learning to feel safe in it. Because maybe love isn't what you thought it was. Maybe love doesn't have to hurt. And maybe now, you're ready to receive the kind of love you never knew existed. The cycle can feel endless. You leave one relationship just to find yourself in another that feels exactly the same. Different face, same ache, same confusion, same questions at 2 a.m. But here's the truth. You don't break the pattern by choosing different people. You break it by becoming someone different inside. That begins with awareness. But awareness alone isn't enough. You need new actions, new beliefs, a new baseline for what you call love. Step 1. Stop blaming yourself. You weren't weak. You weren't naive. You were doing what your nervous system recognized, what your body mistook for love, because no one ever taught you that love could feel safe. You did what you knew, and now you know different. Step 2. Learn to sit with the silence. When you let go of chaos, there will be a void, and at first, it will feel like loneliness, but it's not. It's space. Space for new memories, new stories, and a new kind of love to enter. But only if you don't run back to what's familiar, just to escape the discomfort of emptiness. Because sometimes, the pause is where the healing happens. Step 3. Redefine love. Love is not adrenaline, not anxiety, not chasing, not earning your place. Love is presence. Love is ease. Love is stillness that doesn't punish you for being human. It's someone who stays when you're quiet, when you're messy, when you're not performing. Love is not what wounds you and calls it passion. Love is not what abandons you and calls it space. Love is what stays when you have nothing left to prove. Step 4. Choose yourself. Not in a way that shuts people out, but in a way that finally says, my peace is not negotiable. My worth is not a debate. It means walking away from people you still care about, because you finally care about you more. It means saying no to the cycle. It means grieving the fantasy of who they could have been and loving yourself enough to stop trying to fix what only broke you. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to become that person, you have to stop being who others needed you to be. You have to stop chasing love by abandoning yourself. You have to stop settling for chaos that feels like home, just because calm still feels foreign. Because here's the truth. When you choose peace over pain, when you choose truth over fantasy, when you choose your inner safety over outer validation, the cycle ends. And for the first time, you're not just surviving love. You're experiencing it as it was always meant to be." Carl Jung believed that every soul is on a journey of individuation, a return to the self. Not the self shaped by pain, not the self molded by fear, but the self beneath all the masks. The one you were before you learned to hide. The part of you that existed before the wounds, before the roles, before you believed you had to be quiet, small, perfect, just to be loved. Because people who hurt you didn't just cause pain, they distracted you from your truth. They made you believe you were too sensitive, too emotional, too much, or not enough. But what if you were never too anything? What if your soul was simply too deep for shallow spaces? What if your pain wasn't a defect, but a sign that you were never meant to fit into the mold others built from their own fear? Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who they wanted you to be, not who you became to survive, but who you were before you forgot." And that's the work. Not to chase, not to beg, not to prove your worth to people who couldn't see you, but to remember who you are without their blindness. When you finally stop asking, "Why didn't they love me?" and instead ask, "Why did I stop loving myself?" That's when healing begins. That's when the cycle ends. Not because someone saves you, but because you stop abandoning yourself. This journey isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the place inside you that always knew, the part that whispered, even in the darkest moment, "You are still here, and you are still whole. You were never broken. You were buried under stories, under shame, under silence. And now, you are uncovering. You are returning, not to the past, but to yourself." Maybe no one ever told you that love shouldn't hurt this much. Maybe you've spent years thinking it was your fault, that you were too fragile, too emotional, too needy. But maybe you were never too much. You were just too unprotected. In a world that didn't know how to hold your heart, you were not broken. You were just trying to survive without the warmth you deserved. And survival, it changes people. It teaches you to chase, to shrink, to settle for crumbs, and call it a feast. You learn to wait, to earn, to prove, because no one ever told you that love, real love, needs none of that. But that version of you, the one who waited, the one who begged, the one who clung, doesn't have to run anymore. You don't need to prove that you're lovable. You already are. You don't need to beg for someone to choose you. You've always belonged to yourself. So if anything in this video felt familiar, if it stirred something long buried, let that be a beginning, not an end. Not the end of your story, not the end of your worth, just the end of the pain that told you otherwise, the end of the lie that said you had to earn love, the end of the pattern that said you weren't enough. You are soft and strong. You are healing and whole. You are not alone, not anymore, because maybe you never repeated the pain because you were foolish. Maybe you repeated it because you were trying to heal the part that never got to be held. And now, you get to hold that part, gently, with truth, with peace. You don't have to keep surviving love. You get to start living in it. If this spoke to you, if a part of you finally felt seen, then let this space be a place you return to, not just for answers, but for reminders that your softness is strength, that your healing is already unfolding, and that you were never meant to do this alone. Subscribe if you feel called. Explore the full Carl Jung Wisdom Series. If your heart wants more, we're not rushing healing here. We're remembering truth together. Until then, be gentle with the parts of you still learning what safe love feels like. You are still human, and you are still becoming, and that is enough.